This is Dua Abdelnaim, teacher of English at IPS Alex, and here is my first presentation on professional development. I'm going to handle the topic of goals and objectives. The following points are going to be handled in the same order. 1. What is a goal? 2. What is an objective? 3. Components of an objective. 4. Types of objectives. 5. Bloom's Taxonomy, revised version. 6. How to write strong objectives. 7. Types of tasks. Now let's get started. What is a goal? Simply, a goal is something that you want to be, have, or do. For example, if you want to be a good teacher, so this is your goal. But after that, you need to set a series of objectives through which you can achieve your goal, or your goal will be of no benefit.
Goals can be defined as general statements concerning desirable, attainable program purposes and aims based on perceived language and situation needs. And from this definition, we can realize that goals are general, open-ended, broad statements about what you want to achieve. And it must be attainable. By attainable, I mean it can be achieved. It is achievable. It has to be realistic. And when I say based on perceived language, it means the language in which you're going to write your goals. It should be clear. Have a look at these examples. 1. In our program, the students will learn how to fill in forms in French, read menus, and order a meal. This is a language and situation-centered goal. See how broad this goal is? It includes many situations in which students are going to use a language, fill in forms in French, read menus, order a meal. It is very broad and it should be broken down into a series of objectives because it will be very difficult to measure as it includes many situations. And these situations requires many tasks. Number 2. The goal of our course is that the students will be able to converse in social German with a focus on greetings, conversational openers, polite rejoinders. Rejoinders means replies, and farewells. This is a functional goal. And as you can see, it includes many language functions. And this cannot be included in one task. Number 3, in our course, the students will learn the grammatical system of French. This is a very broad goal, a structural one. This will require so many tasks, and this cannot be measured unless we break it down into many objectives. Let's move on to the next point. What is an objective? When you move from goals to objectives, you move from the general to the specific. So, if you want to be a good teacher, and this is your goal, you have to think of what you should do in order to be a good teacher, in what conditions, and at which degree. This is your objective, the plan you're going to make in order to achieve your goal. And without this plan, your goal will be of no benefit. Objectives can be defined as specific statements that describe particular knowledge, behaviors, and/or skills that the learner will be expected to know or to perform at the end of a course or a program. So, objectives must be learner-centered. It has to do with what the learners will be able to do at the end of a course or at the end of a lesson. But why are objectives so important? Because they serve as signposts to indicate the destination of the learning process. Imagine yourself on a journey and you meet signposts every now and then on your way to know which route you're going to follow to reach your destination. Also, they help both teachers and students to be realistic in terms of what they need to achieve. And finally, they facilitate self-assessment because we can use objectives to help students to assess their progress, and this can be done at the end of each lesson when we change the objectives into can-do statements. Components of an objective. An objective should include the following components: 1. Performance. 2. Conditions. 3. Criterion. Number 1. Performance. A detailed description of the expected behavior from the learner, and this should be measurable and observable. In what way? It should contain an action verb. So we should keep away from verbs like know or understand because we cannot really find a tool that can measure understanding or knowing. Instead, we can use explain, list, define, outline, paraphrase, differentiate, and so on. For example, by the end of this lesson, the learner will be able to retell the story in their own words with the help of some pictures. Number 2, conditions. A description of the circumstances in which the task will be performed. It may include a description of the available resources and tools learners can use to complete the desired behavior. In other words, it describes what the learners will use, have access to, or not be allowed to use. For example, a calculator, a PC, notes, dictionary, website. For example, given list from the instructor, using personal computer without the aid of references, with the help of their lab partner, and this describe a real world condition in which performance will take place. Here is another example. Given a pair of scissors and a glue stick, the condition is written here in red, and it includes the tools available for the learners to use in order to achieve this objective. Learners will be able to cut, glue, and stick pictures of animals in the appropriate place within 10 minutes. So the condition is mentioned at the beginning here. Number 3, criterion. A description of the criterion that indicates mastery of the objective that describes the desired or appropriate level of performance. It can include speed and accuracy. In other words, how well you would like your students to perform the task. This can include the time as well. You can say within 5 minutes, and when we talk about accuracy, we can say without error, or with no more than 3 mistakes. And this has to do with the measurement of acceptable performance. For example, students will be able to complete the 3 times table quiz within 10 minutes or with 75% accuracy. So the criterion is written in red here. Number 4, types of objectives. Objectives can either be real-world objectives or pedagogic objectives. For real-world objectives, they describe a task that learners may wish to perform outside the classroom, such as ordering a meal at a restaurant or asking for directions. Pedagogic objectives describe a task to be carried out in the classroom. This is the case when we teach our students to pronounce words correctly or to use a certain grammatical point, or when they do a task which focuses on the form of language rather than the message to be delivered. Let's have a look at an example of real-world objective. In a shop, supermarket, or a department store, learners will ask for the price of a given item or items. Questions will be comprehensible to shop assistants who are not used to dealing with non-native speakers. Here is a pedagogic objective. Listening to a conversation between a shopper and the shop assistant, the learner will identify which of the 3 shopping lists belong to the shopper question. Number 5, Bloom's taxonomy. Learning domains can be classified into 3 categories. Cognitive domain, which is related to the head and the knowledge that we teach our students and the mental skills they learn. Psychomotor domain, it is associated with the hand doing and the manual skills. Affective domain, it is associated with the feelings, emotional growth, the attitude of the learners. We'll focus on the classification of how people think and learn. Benjamin Bloom created this taxonomy in 1956 to represent the 6 levels of thinking. When you move from the bottom to the top, you move from the lower levels of thinking, remember, understand, apply, to the higher levels of thinking when the tasks get complicated, analyze, evaluate, and create. You can use these levels associated with some action verbs in order to create your objectives for a task, for a course, for a program.
Number 1, remember. This involves retrieving relevant knowledge from long-term memory. The potential activities associated with this level: listing characters in a story, reciting a poem, making a list of main events. And this level of thinking can be associated with some action verbs like define, describe, identify, match, label. Very young learners rely on this level of thinking to achieve or perform the objectives of their tasks because they are very simple. For example, when they match a picture with the word, they rely on their memory. They remember the name of the item in the picture. If I ask you about the definition of objectives, you rely on your memory and you define objectives using the exact words that you can remember. Number 2, understand. And this involves determining the meaning of instructional messages or explaining how something works. And it is worth mentioning that every level in Bloom's taxonomy builds on the other. So in order to understand the concept, you should first remember it. Potential activities: retell the story in your own words, write a summary or report of an event, explain the difference between a triangle and rectangle. Some action verbs that can be associated with this level of thinking: explain, outline, discuss, compare, predict, distinguish. So if I ask you, can you explain the definition of objectives? You should first remember the definition in order to explain it in your own words. That's why I said that every level builds on the previous ones. Number 3, apply, which involves carrying out or using a procedure in a given situation. In other words, you are going to use and apply the knowledge that you know. Potential activities: working out the surface of a rectangular desk. And the verbs that can be associated with this level of thinking are apply, demonstrate, solve, show, use.
Number 4, analyze. And this is one of the higher levels of thinking. It involves breaking material into parts to organize and differentiate, and to identify reasons and causes, finding evidence to support your views. For example, if I ask my students, why are dolphins called mammals? They will analyze the information they already know to find a reason or an evidence for their answer. The potential activities: construct a graph, compare the result of an experiment with a classmate, and this also may involve making a survey or writing a biography or designing a questionnaire. The verbs associated with this level are analyze, compare, examine, distinguish.
5, evaluate. And this involves making judgment based on criteria and standards. And when students reach this level, they are able to defend their opinion and provide evidence. So the potential activities here can be: prepare and conduct a debate, write a persuasive speech arguing for or against something. For example, what are the pros and cons of the internet? Action verbs associated with this level of thinking: evaluate, explain, justify, support, discuss, assess. 6. Create. Putting elements together to create something new. And for this level of thinking, learners should come up with something new. Potential activities. Developing a menu for a new restaurant using a variety of healthy food. Invent a tool to do a specific task. Design a magazine. Design a questionnaire. Action verbs associated with this level: create, design, plan, construct. Here is Bloom's Taxonomy, the original version, created in 1956. Starting with knowledge instead of remember, comprehension instead of understand, application instead of apply, analysis instead of analyze, and here synthesis instead of create, which was in the last level, and finally evaluation instead of evaluate. How to write strong learning objectives. Step 1. Start with the STEM sentence. For example, after completing this module, you will be able to. Step 2. Determine the learning outcome. Step 3. Consult the Bloom's wheel to select the appropriate level and verb. Step 4. Write the verb and learning outcome into a statement that, when combined with the stem, forms a complete sentence as follows. After completing this module, you will be able to classify learning objectives within the 6 cognitive domains of Bloom's taxonomy.
This wheel diagram illustrates the wheel of Bloom's taxonomy, including levels of thinking with the potential activities and action verbs associated with each level.
Learning objectives are measurable, observable statements of what students will be able to do at the end of a unit of learning. These verbs should be avoided when creating your objectives. Understand, know, appreciate, become familiar with, learn, be aware of. Because again, we can't find a reliable tool that can help you measure such verbs. Now have a look at these objectives. Do you think the following statements are good objectives, and why? To go over the pronunciation of the new words with the class, to write the new spelling words 10 times to memorize them, to know the definition of goals and objectives. All of these objectives are poor. But why? For the first one, to go over the pronunciation of the new words with the class, this is teacher-centered. This cannot be an objective. As we said before, objectives should be learner-centered. The second, to write the new spelling words 10 times to memorize them. This is a process. We are concerned with the outcome, the product, not the process of learning. To know the definition of goals and objectives. This is not a measurable verb. No. Instead, we could say to define goals and objectives. types of tasks. Tasks can be only for learning, and in this case they focus on the form of the language, the structure, and they can be communicative tasks focusing on the meaning, the message that we can deliver using the target language. And in this case it develops fluency rather than accuracy. This table provides examples and explanation of tasks, either those focusing on forms or those focusing on the meaning. And if we move from the left to the right side of this table, we move from focusing on the form towards focusing on meaning. First, non-communicative learning. In these types of tasks, we focus on the structure of the language and how language is formed, and this develops accuracy rather than fluency. And a very good example of this type of tasks is the substitution exercises, either substitution sentences for very young learners or substitution tables. Pre-communicative language practice. In this case, students give some attention to meaning, but they don't deliver a certain message to others. For example, question and answer practice. They are just trained to ask a question and answer the question. Communicative language practice, then the beginning of the communicative activities, for example, information gap activities or personalized questions. In this case, students communicate new information. Structured communication, this involves role play and simple problem solving, but in this case with some unpredictability, because this is a structured role play in which you give students guidance and telling them what they are going to ask about. And for the authentic communication, using language to communicate in situations where the meanings are unpredictable, because these role plays are not structured at all. You just tell the students what roles they are going to play, and they are going to initiate the language.
Here is an example of a traditional task that focuses on the form of language. Substitution exercise. And why we call it substitution? Because we can replace or substitute any part of the sentence with any option from this table. For example, he is standing near a car. We can remove near a car and use under the bridge instead.
Another type of tasks, which is a communicative one, is information gap activity, which is an activity where learners are missing the information they need to complete a task and need to talk to each other to find it. For example, learner A and learner B are working on the same text, but each text has some missing parts. Learner A has a biography of a famous person with the places names missing, whilst learner B has the same text with all the dates missing. Together they are going to complete the text asking each other questions. That's why we call it information gap activity, because they communicate using the target language in order to fill in this gap.
I think you can differentiate between real-world objectives and pedagogic objectives now. But as a reminder, real-world objectives refer to what learners wish to do using the target language in real life. Whatever activity they can do outside the classroom using English. For example, working in pairs, learners make a shopping list with at least 5 vegetables and 5 fruits. This is a real world objective because this can be done outside the classroom in real life using English. They can write a shopping list in English. And as for the pedagogic objective, this refers to whatever is done for educational purpose, such as teaching vocabulary, structure, pronunciation, and so on. Listening to a text, students will be able to write adjectives, at least 6 adjectives, correctly. This is a pedagogic objective. We do this in the classroom in order to teach students how to identify adjectives in a listening text. As for the 3 components of objectives, which are performance, condition, criterion, we have a set of objectives and you're going to identify the performance part, the condition part, and the criterion part. And by performance, we refer to the expected behavior from the learner, condition, the circumstances, the resources available for them to use, the criterion, the level of performance expected from the students. Look at the last objective, number 5. Given an illustrated English dictionary, students look up the meaning of some words within a period of time set by the teacher. For given an illustrated English dictionary, this is the condition because this part refers to the resource which is available for the learners to use in order to do the task. And the behavior expected from the students is to look up the meaning of the given words using this dictionary, of course. And as for the criterion, the teacher is going to set a time in which the students or during which the students are expected to perform this task. Task number 3. Using Bloom's taxonomy, create the objectives that can achieve the following goal: to develop the skill of listening, speaking, reading, and writing in an integrated way with the focus on communication skills. And for this very broad goal, you can refer back to the course book you were working on last year and try to extract the objectives that can achieve such a goal or create your own objectives. Thank you very much. I wish you had benefited from this video.